you very much for joining us on a Sunday afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, greetings to Tom. Tom Cooper is someone we all recognize from television and of course digital media during Operation Sindoor and the aftermath. So I just accidentally used this line, "I'll be back." And it just occurred to me that that was a line, a very famous line spoken by someone of Austrian origin, whose movie lines were very short, extremely short. And but in sharp contrast to that, Tom Cooper is someone who is extremely prolific, as you just heard, and you must have seen him. He writes a lot, and he's spoken quite a bit about Operation Sindoor. He is, in fact, the go-to person for Op Sindoor who's not based in India. And in fact, I'm holding a copy of his book, The 88 Hours War, which he's co-authored with Ravi Rikhe, Sanjay Badri Maharaj, my friend who sent it to me, and of course, Mangesh Sawant. It's one of the finest accounts that I've ever read of a military operation because it is so beautifully illustrated. I discovered that Tom Cruise is also an illustrator. And when I saw his images, Tom, sorry, this is a big fanboy moment for me. Give me a few more seconds. In an age of AI, it is to see the illustrations, the pain with which they've been illustrated, every single item of hardware that was used by both India and Pakistan in the 88 Hours War. When you see that, you realize there is still hope for humanity, in this age of AI-generated visuals. But, to cut a long story short, Tom, once again, tell us, because you studied Op Sindoor so closely. We are approaching the first anniversary of Sindoor a few months from now. What was it about Operation Sindoor, to your mind, as an aviation analyst, that made it so unique among all the other conflicts you've studied?
Thank you very much for such a kind invitation and presentation. I'm really deeply humbled how I decided to talk about Operation Sindoor. What was most fascinating for me was this the work of the Indian integrated air defense system. That is not only an air defense system or defense system, but a system that is integrated so many different elements of the Indian armed forces and the war of so many elements of the Indian armed forces, the army, the air force, electronic warfare, cyber warfare, of course, flying operations of the Indian Air Force, but especially air defense systems of the army and the Air Force. And what was really even hard to kind of accept, even though visually confirmed again and again and again and again, was how well was this system working. How whatever the Pakistanis were shooting at India, everything was not 100%, but mass of incoming projectiles, artillery rockets, UAVs were shot down. There were really just a few exceptions to this rule. Most fascinating for me was to see this system working that well. It was not self-understanding, because over the years I've studied air defense systems of the United States, of former Soviet Union or Russia, of Egypt, of Syria, of Iran lately, and I've never seen an air defense system, or actually this tactical management system, working that well. Even in comparison to just a few years ago. This was deeply impressive for me. It was a very impressive moment, especially when it turned out that the Pakistanis had absolutely nothing to show. I mean, it was proven through their own action, through China's actions as well, that they had absolutely nothing to show in return for their effort, which was massive as far as Pakistan is concerned. So this functionality, efficiency, effectiveness, this tactical management system, whatever you want to call it, of the Indian integrated systems, that was the most fascinating moment for me.
Right. Thanks, Tom. For that take on the IACCS2. That's what Tom was referring to, the integrated air command and control system that the Indian Air Force has built up over the years. I have an interesting story, a Mumbai story actually, very quickly before I go on to Vibhu. I was in the Indian Express. I was a reporter in 1995. Our photo editor was Mr. Mukesh Partyani, Kashish's father. If Kashish is around here. So he had sent one of his photographers with me, and we had gone to the Mumbai airport, and we had stories of an AN-26 and AN-24 that had been forced there. It was a Ukrainian aircraft with, I think, Latvian crew, which had dropped weapons on Purulia in Bengal, and that aircraft was detained, and we were looking for one person who escaped from there, Kim Philby or Kim Davy or something like that. So that was the start point, and we began raising a lot of questions way back then in 1995 December. How can an aircraft, a foreign aircraft, come, drop weapons, explosives on Indian soil, fly out without anyone knowing about it? So that was the start point for what we saw during Sindoor, where over 3 decades, the Indian military put together one of the most elaborate air defense systems, network systems of multiple countries plugged into this one giant system, which is the IACCS. And that was the proof of the pudding, in Sindoor, as Tom mentioned, that this was a system which knocked down so many of the enemy's missiles, brought down aircraft even at extreme long ranges, but that I'm going to ask Tom a little while later about that 300-kilometer plus shot. But Vibhu, I want to bring you in here because you're the procurements guy. There's a lot of criticism about India's slow pace of acquisitions, arms acquisitions. The average time taken for a statement of case to be made to translate into an acquisition is 8 years, 7 to 8 years. That's a horrifying figure. But tell us what we did right with IACCS. Why was it such a success? And why did no one really know about it? I mean, very few people in the military also knew about IACCS. You kept it as a very closely guarded secret. So, for a country that's really, noisy, garrulous, very open, argumentative society, there are some secrets we keep very well. Some of the strategic programs are still secret. IACCS was one such thing. Tell us about this and the Army's Akash Tir as well.
Thank you, Sandeep. It's a very good question.
Sorry, Tom. This is to Vibhu, my panelist here. I'll come to you, Tom, in a minute.
Okay.
IACCS has been, it's a very, very important system which Indian Armed Forces are having. And such systems are also not meant to be seen or to be known about in that way in the public domain, in that open form as we know about other systems. Now, the biggest success of IACCS has been that firstly it has been integrated with the services, that is the Air Force and partially Army Air Defense, as both as clients and customers and as well as co-developers with the government agencies. It's not that we got IACCS in one day or in just a few years. It has taken decades for that to evolve. Now, the system involves a host of sensors. They can be airborne, they can be ground-based. Now, what you see, what you feed back, what you analyze, and the decision that you take, the entire loop, and then translate into a decision whether a weapon system can be released to counter a threat or not, is what this entire system does. So, it's a beautiful thing, integration of technology, getting the entire picture together onto a simple huge screen where you can, really, visualize the entire airspace picture, take a call and deliver. But the underlying factor has been that the services, that is the Air Force, the Air Defense to some extent, and the development agencies have worked in tandem. So it has taken years and years for it to evolve. That's what happens. Akash for Army Air Defense initially was on a standalone path, but then of course it is what now integrated. I think these are systematic steps as we evolve towards fire services platform, synergy, and that's how they happen. Just a word about the procurement process. I do agree that yes, the process has been long and elongated, it takes time. But I think we have taken steps with the new DAP 2026 on its way now. I think things should improve tremendously. Also, the emergency powers have been given for the last 6-7 years post the one. What has happened out here is that a lot of, I would say, short-term gaps which have come up are being filled up through procurement through these channels. One thing we also need to understand and realize in military procurement is that we need equipment which is tested for military environments. It is not easy for people to manufacture these kind of equipment. There are tall cleaner times, so industry also needs to step in and match that. Other day, sort of a month back in an open forum, there was a statement which was made that why should we insist on an FOPM model, first of production model? And my question there was, please say the statistics as to where, how many prototypes at first of production model actually fail to meet the quality requirements. So I think it's a work in process, it will take time. Sindoor has been a definitive and a very good opportunity to take the lessons home in terms of procurement also. And I'm sure that the policies will evolve further and the timeline will get shorter.
Right. So, coming back to Sindoor and Tom Cooper, my question to you again is that, there's been a huge debate around Sindoor, especially in the opening hours. Like, a couple of aircraft were downed. They downed a few of ours, it is believed. We downed some of theirs. Give us an idea of these losses and how do you see it as an air historian, as a military analyst? How important is it to take stock of these? Do they affect the larger campaign? The fact that you lost a few jets, does it affect the outcome of a campaign like this? A short, intense 88-hour campaign.
Okay, it's really for early interference, I came in between because there are so many interferences in the audio of the conference. Anyway, to come back to your question, losses. We are used to actually, let me be very, very frank. The US in particular, Western propaganda actually, is teaching us that for meanwhile for 30 years that it's fantastic, the US and the Western armed forces are fantastic, they are executing their operations without losses at all. Why? Actually, there are losses, they are suffering losses as well. Just when you try to research about this topic, it takes decades to find out what kind of losses exactly. So then there is a talk about no loss, huge success, victory, blah blah blah. In the West, take that reservation. These days we can monitor how there are no losses for US forces and Allied forces in Iran very well and neighborhood. So therefore, the question is that of Indian Air Force losses in this war. Obviously, Indian Air Force has suffered several losses. The question is how and when. And this is a particularly important question because the build-up to Operation Sindoor was going on for what, 2 weeks or something. And Pakistanis knew the strike is going to come, and yet they have been caught unprepared, sleeping, literally. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that when one is cross-checking what has happened then, during the night from 6th to 7th, or in the first hours of 7th of May last year, it turns out that Indian Air Force has performed its retaliation strike without any kind of problems, or at least without any kind of losses. That means the Indian Air Force aircraft approached Pakistan, went into their climbs to launch their weaponry over ranges of up to 120 kilometers, have hit their targets, and they do without any kind of loss. So this is a matter of fact. There were no losses, but regardless what the Pakistanis are claiming in this regard. What then did happen was that the Pakistani Air Force, about 1 hour later, launched a sort of a counterattack and began targeting the Indian Air Force aircraft flying combat air patrols over India. This is also a matter of fact. So you just need to check the timestamps of social media posts. Nothing special, really. Okay, one might need to check hundreds of such posts in Pakistan and in India and social media, the situation coming or the results coming are crystal clear. There were no Indian Air Force forces during the retaliation strike, and then there were losses during Pakistani Air Force counterattack on the Indian Air Force combat air patrols above India. So why this happened is a different story. It happened probably because of, that is what we are explaining in the book, probably because of intelligence mistake, or failure, or whatever. In terms of this PL-15E hoax, there is a talk about whether Chinese have delivered some sort of downgraded export variant. There is none of that. I've checked with somebody who is working for Poly Technologies Group in China, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. So, didn't mention that in the book, but let's leave it at that. Point is the following: losses as such have been suffered, no dispute about this. How many, I'm not sure, because both sides are secretive about this, but in grand total, they are not changing the outcome of the war. And that is now the next problem, the control the narrative. New Delhi has sadly lost to control the narrative. Why and how, I'm leaving that to you to sort this out. You are in India, I'm not. I'm just analyzing their work. And in this regard, it's clear, Indian Air Force has suffered several losses, and Pakistani had overblown this into a victory in the war, which is nonsense. They have won perhaps one or two air battles, nothing more. And for even this, they have achieved only through shooting dozens of PL-15 missiles, air missiles into India. The same gentleman from working for Poly Technologies was very furious about this issue. Pakistan is facing dozens of missiles to shut down one or two Indian Air Force aircraft. There is no evidence for more. So, and then Pakistan has converted this into a huge victory and whatever else, and the biggest air battle of all the times, all of which is actually nonsensical, as much as it was particularly professionally presented to the public. And instantly, both by all of the West, oh, the Indians are silly, and so on, have lost the war again. So this is one thing. Next thing, India did not lose the nerves. At least the people in charge did not lose the nerves. They have debated patiently, studied what has happened, or how could it happen, and so on for one day, for another day, and waiting for their moment. And then at a suitable point in time, after Pakistanis were launching this Hormuz operation, Indian Air Force hit back, but really, okay, not with full force. Indian Air Force would have hit Pakistan even harder than it did. But it hit them really hard. And then go the entire situation to the point. You can shoot at us as much as you like, and whatever you want, you're shooting all of this down. Ballistic missiles, air-launched cruise missiles, air-launched ballistic missiles, not to talk about hundreds of rounds of artillery, rockets, and so on and so on. But the Indian Air Force and Indian Army have shot down the mass of this, and then the Indian Air Force delivered this debilitating strike against Pakistan. And this is the point now. In Western press, in particular in American press, military special press, you can always hear this about fighter pilots winning battles, air battles, but bomber pilots winning wars. Well, this is what has happened in this war, which is that Indian Air Force brought its first force, the Pakistani Air Force, to stay away from the border, do the activity of its sense, and then brought in its fighter bombers to launch air-launched ballistic missiles and other weaponry to strike selected targets inside Pakistan. And delivered such a clear message: you are losing the war, and if we want, we can defeat you. So this is a combination of very clever military strategy with political strategy in this case. And what turns out, what is the result of all of this? India is winning the war. So are they now, has India suffered losses? Yes, it has. It has won the war. This is the point of the entire affair. The losses are unavoidable. And if you have the impression that the Americans or the Israelis are winning wars without any kind of losses, sorry, that is not true. Because when one investigates, it takes even decades long to find the evidence. They are suffering losses. They have suffered losses over Iraq in 1991, they have suffered losses over Yugoslavia in 1990, or Serbia, sorry, in 1999. They have suffered losses in different conflicts as well. Israelis too. So, the only difference is that in India we have a different approach. You're much more open in this regard. Okay, your government, your authorities have subsequently, clamped down, and there is no additional evidence became available since May of last year. So back then in May, your social media has provided enough evidence to confront people with significant dose of totality that you have suffered losses. However, in Grand Total, this is making no difference because you have won the war. That's the point. Just like the Americans or the Israelis have won specific other wars, you have won your war. You have suffered losses, they have suffered losses as well. So don't get distracted with this. It is tragic and sad for people who are involved to get shot down, to get wounded in the process, for their families and so on. Absolutely no dispute about this. But what does matter is that you have won the war. This is why I'm repeating this so often. I've seen this in discussions, not only with you, but with several other people in Delhi, or as I was there 2 weeks ago. There is still uncertainty in this regard. Oh gosh, is this a victory if we have lost a few aircraft or not? There is no dispute about this. There is a victory. I don't understand why is anybody asking such questions. Excuse me for expression. I tend to be undiplomatic and so on. This is not intentional. But there is really no denial that India has won this war. Now, of course, you can argue about this or that, and diplomatic, and Trump has said this, and Trump has said that. Who cares? Nobody cares, because you have won the war. And how do you know that you have won the war? Because Pakistan was simply at the end to stop attacking India, because it was pointless to continue, first. And secondly, because there is clear and obvious evidence of severe damage from what is it, 12 or 13 major Pakistani military facilities. Not only on these facilities, but also on radar systems, on electronic warfare systems. There are videos showing the Pakistani Air Force evacuating its aircraft very further west because it couldn't keep them safe at their bases. There are videos of Pakistani Air Force scattering its aircraft to secondary air bases or airfields, however you want to call them, which are not even complete, just in order to hide them from the Indian Air Force. And then finally you have the diplomatic scene when Islamabad was calling 2 or 3 times New Delhi on the hotline, requesting for discussion and negotiations and so on. And New Delhi, very intentionally, or because it didn't care or whatever other reasons that it like to use to research, ladies and gentlemen, didn't answer because it didn't have to. New Delhi was not in trouble that morning, not that afternoon. Islamabad was in deep trouble. Why? Because it couldn't keep India. It tried so hard and it turned out that it can't keep India. So, now call me biased if you like or whatever, but I'm just talking about facts. So, eventually you have won the war. And if there were 2 or 3 or 5, or let's use Article 47 and they call it 11 losses, yeah. Nobody was killed on the Indian side, but it's not violence. Yes, we have suffered some losses on the ground in terms of army soldiers and some airmen killed, which is tragic, which is sad. And ask the Pakistanis to check their list of people who were decorated and all of them posthum because they were killed by the Indian fighters. How come? For self-defense.
Thanks very much, Tom. I think you answered that question beautifully, and my follow-on question as well was going to be who won the war, and you answered that very emphatically, that we might have lost a few battles, but we ended up winning the war, and that's what really matters in the case of Sindoor. A quick follow-on question to you, Tom, before I bring Mangesh in. So my question to you, Tom, is that does Pakistan's geography, it's not a very large country, it's about 1,500 kilometers by about 500 kilometers. Given the kind of weaponry that India has now begun inducting, the BrahMos is one, there will be other air-launched ballistic missiles as well. Does Pakistan's geography make it very difficult to carry out any kind of air operation or any kind of naval operation, given that all their air bases, all their naval bases, all their army installations, radars are within strike range of Indian military?
Geography is always playing its role. It's always dictating warfare. It's going to dictate the warfare even in 2,000 years from now. That there might be only AIs and robots fighting wars for different nations or whatever. But one should keep in mind the following: the size of the terrain, or in this case of a country, is actually of advantage, especially if the country is smaller. And Pakistan is significantly smaller than India. So theoretically, they should have been able to make it easier for themselves to defend themselves. They have also undertaken significant efforts in regards of constructing these underground facilities. On listed them in the book, some dozen of major air bases or forward operating bases, where they have focused everything important. It means command and control centers, special weapon storage, and personnel berthing in one space, in one underground facility. So they have made it easier for police, at least in theory, to defend themselves. Where Pakistan has failed, where Pakistan is systematically failing for decades already, is that the armed forces are so insistent on remaining relevant and actually in charge of the country. The country continues bankrupting itself every 2 years. So they are lacking money to actually buy a proper air defense system and tactical management system. So what they did was to misappropriate a lot of Chinese investment over the last 15 years for different purposes, primarily related to the armed forces. And that was their failure, because when you have a system like in Pakistan, that is the establishment is controlling everything, and then inside the establishment there are unofficial circles which are at odds with each other. That means the army is at odds with the Air Force is at odds with the army, and Navy nobody cares about it, and so on. And this results in every single of these branches of the armed forces buying something else, or being donated something else, and not working upward, not working in proper fashion. So as much as they are prized as highly professional and so on, they are unprofessional. So they are positional. And this is where the fundamentals of the problem are actually. Why? Because then the army buys HQ-16 or whatever, the Air Force buys HQ-9s, army buys HQ-9s as well. Then they have this integrated attempts to create an integrated air defense system, but then the Air Force goes in its own direction because it's convinced there's not going to be any kind of a major war with India, or it's unlikely to happen. While the army goes along what has agreed the Air Force 15 or 20 years ago, and then eventually nothing works. What a surprise. Again, if you have such actually a power struggle between different branches of the armed forces, then don't be surprised if things are not working. Contrary, in India, you have concentrated effort to develop IACCS, and then you have concentrated effort to develop a similar system for the army, and to integrate these two and to make them work. You know, just think about the size of the effort in question. It's a 40,000 kilometers digital cable network in India, connecting hundreds of bases, and meanwhile also capable of connecting not only ground bases, naval bases, or air bases, but also flying aircraft. I mean, this is a mammoth work, huge effort. And India has done this. Pakistan not, or at least not as successfully as India has. So this is a fundamental difference. And this is where I think you have to be proud of yourself. Sorry for emphasizing this in such a fashion, but this is also something I'm not always sure is a matter of fact in India. So fundamental difference is professionalism. One can now discuss whether this or that general or this or that politician is good or not, or whatever else, but the fact is that the total result of this massive effort is a success. That's what matters. Why is it a success? It was proven in the battle and it works. On the other side, Pakistanis are bragging with acquisition of this, acquisition of that, acquisition of J-10s, acquisition of H-29s, acquisition of H-260s, acquisition of best US radars, best Chinese radars, blah, 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 blah. And when they put all that together, it didn't work. It's not as good as what India has. And that although they have, under most of us, they have less target to defend, less territory to defend. They should ask themselves lots of questions. As simple as that. So, terrain, yes, is important, but on the other hand, this terrain was also of advantage to a certain degree for Pakistan. Why? Most of the terrain in Pakistan, at least in eastern Pakistan, is flat, and you have these huge hills or mountains in between. It's easy to position a radar over there, and you have a beautiful view deep into India. But theoretically, they should have some kind of advantages in this regard as well. Because most of northern India, northwestern India is flat. You don't have such hills like Kirana, you don't, except further in the north. So, theoretically, they should have the advantage in this regard as well. Something went wrong on their side, something was not as well integrated as their boasting. As they are paying Western journalists to boast about their capabilities. It didn't work that well. Whether it was due to Indian cyber warfare or electronic warfare, whatever it was, something didn't work and something has all power. Almost obviously, this operation for India, Air Force, long-range sense, Air Force, very far away from the border, which in turn meant they cannot get close to the border in order to shoot their PL-15 at incoming Indian Air Force fighter bombers before this could release their air network. And then you have a situation where their air defenses were oversaturated by the number of incoming missiles and by the speed of these missiles, by stealthiness in the case of Scout, and so on and so on. So terrain is important, yes, but obviously in this case it didn't work in Pakistan's favor.
Right. Thanks, Tom. A great analysis there. And what I've always maintained is the 10th of May, India's response was what we call in India an out-of-syllabus question. And that is what kind of took Pakistan by surprise. And as you mentioned, Tom, so beautifully, the fact that they did not invest in the kind of things that you said as an analyst they should have easily done, the kind of radars they should have put up. And we kind of invested in IACCS, and that stood us in good stead. But I want to bring in this thing of defeat and victory that you mentioned. And I'm going to ask Mangesh to come in. He's been waiting very patiently to come in on this narrative warfare part. Like, Sindoor was the first war that we've seen being fought in the narrative sphere. Wars have normally been in the land, sea, air, space, cyber. Sindoor was the first to go into the sixth dimension of narrative warfare, whereas Tom mentioned that Pakistan seemed to have had an edge in emphasizing certain aspects, certain tactical victories, which they spun out as a strategic victory, and that led to some kind of confusion even on our side. What was the pluses and minuses of how we responded to Ops Sindoor, at least in the narrative space?
Thanks. Okay. Thanks, Sandeep. That's an extremely nice question. If we see contemporary warfare, it's more fought on the social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, after the actual war is over, and more so when the war is on, because it's the cognitive warfare where individuals in a particular country, their minds are being controlled. And in this way, I think the Pakistani and the Chinese media were running a disinformation warfare. Especially if you see the Chinese media, they made a big point of, we were signing the Rafale deal during that, and the Rafales are already playing a major part in Operation Sindoor. And they made a big deal about a couple of Rafales, 4 or 5 Rafales which were shot down. It was not true. They went all over the media. There was a parallel deal between the French Dassault company happening with Indonesia. So again, they made a disinformation warfare that the Dassault Rafale fighters are not quite good. So this is one part where the Pakistani media and the Chinese were hand in hand and playing quite a successful role. And I think we should be having a separate department to fight wars, narrative wars on social media. If you see in the Iranian war, I think about a week back, an F-35 stealth 5th generation fighter was shot by Iran. Now that was supposed to be an impossible shot, but it was shot down. If you go back to 1999 Kosovo War, a stealth fighter was shot down by Kosovo. One of the army SA-2 surface to air missile guideline weapon system. Again, F-117 was an extremely impeccable aircraft which was capable of including enemy air defenses in a stealthy fashion, but that was shot down. Again, in narrative warfare, as I just explained what Tom said, you have to look at the forest, not the trees. It's a war, there will be losses on both the sides. So that's very important. And one more thing I would like to point out, we as individuals of the Army, Navy, Air Force is conducting their operations, they are keeping this nation safe. But we should not be swayed away by the disinformation campaigns which China and Pakistan has launched over social media, which we read it and then forward it and then it has most likes. So we have to be very well aware of the cognitive warfare, what China and Pakistan are playing. For example, I'll tell you why this war was stellar in the military history. The Gulf War I, which was fought in 1990, 1991, where Iraq was on one side and the stakes were high, while entire NATO forces plus Saudi forces, certain European forces which are outside NATO have also participated. America took around 3 months. So it took around 2,160 hours to end the Gulf War. Imagine NATO is there, Americans are there, the British are there, against Iraq, where their operational capability, Iraq's operational capabilities, I would rate them a little bit lower than the Pakistani Air Force and the Army Navy. And we took 88 hours to finish the war, that is 3 days. So I think that makes an impeccable point. I think these points should be highlighted on the social media.
Thanks, Mangesh. 88 hours, India scored victory over there. But, I'm going to ask Tom again to come in on this. That, Tom, you saw certain aspects of the future of warfare during Operation Sindoor. Non-kinetic, non-contact warfare, where both sides engaged each other over extreme distances. They fired long-range missiles. We fired S-400 missiles, knocking down an aircraft at over 300 kilometers. We're seeing a similar kind of warfare here between Iran, Israel and the United States. It's among them one day today. Do you think that Operation Sindoor kind of indicates what future warfare is going to be like? With a lot of more drones, ballistic missiles, supersonic cruise missiles and the like, where literally countries will think twice before sending boots on the ground in the first case. Like, as Mangesh mentioned, Gulf War I, Gulf War II, and now you have Op Sindoor, and to an extent you have Op Epic Fury and what's going on in Iran and True Promise. What's your take on this, Tom?
This is a very good question, thank you. I think, yes, it's a good indication for what the future warfare is going to look like. There one has to add some reservations in this regard. For the Indian army troops, for Pakistan army troops, this was very personal, very close up. Because if you check, we didn't cover this in the book because there was too information at the time. If you check what was going on along the front lines, along the border and line of control up there in the north, how heavily does Indian army's artillery hit the Pakistani army positions? Believe me, this was very close up and personal. So yes, on a certain degree, to a certain degree, this long range, this exchange of long range fire and exchange of cyber warfare, electronic warfare, and so on. Absolutely right, yes, it is the future of warfare. And we see this artillery fort now in over Iraq and all the Western Asia. But one shouldn't forget that there is still this aspect of ground warfare when the fighters or trigger power pullers have to face as well to finish the story. This is then what in turn results in some people, only a few people criticizing Indian government for not finishing this war. I think that New Delhi did right. Sorry, I'm going off topic a little bit now, but would like to I think that New Delhi did right in not going any further in regards of disabling Pakistani armed forces. Because it has shown that they demonstrated it can defend India from whatever Pakistan throws at it, and at the same time it can disable Pakistan and Pakistani armed forces as it likes by hitting specific selected points in Pakistan. India could have continued in similar fashion like United States and Israel currently trying with Israel, and would have been far more successful than either the United States or Israel are right now in disabling Pakistan, Pakistani armed forces. But then there was a conclusion, look, is this really in Indian interest? So, to come back to your question, yes, it is something like a prototype of future warfare in terms of AI, application of AI, application of cyber warfare in particular, of application of electronic warfare, application of deployment of long-range weaponry to exercise pressure or to destroy these strategic points in Pakistan, in particular from the Indian point of view. And we can expect only more of this in the future. In this regard, I hope that, I expect actually, and I hope the Indian armed forces are going to continue pushing in a similar direction like the last few years, to come up with more surprises, like, for example, the army has turned out to be excellent equipped to counter the UAVs. This came as one of the biggest surprises of this war, Operation Sindoor last year. Because all of a sudden there were entire systems and large parts of the front line of the border and the LOC were covered by excellent, highly functional and highly effective anti-UAV systems of the Indian armed forces. And nobody was talking about these systems before the 7th of May, or actually 10th of May. So it is pointing in the direction of, yes, India is heading in the right direction, doing the right things. I hope, or I count on India continuing in this fashion. Because this is the future, that is definitely sure. Let me add one more detail. You already have, the DRDO is already working, or was already working years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. So developing continuous adaptive electronic warfare systems. This is, excuse me, I don't have sort of vocabulary for this, but essentially these are systems which are continually, obviously in terms of AI also, continuously adapting themselves to emerging threats encountered on the battlefield. And developing new countermeasures, sometimes also in advance of what the enemy is deploying. So instead of earlier times, first there is a new threat, and then there is a reaction. We have constant reaction, constant action too, in regards to developing electronic warfare capabilities. This was one of the particularly fascinating things, and I guess this is also what caused such problems to Pakistanis. That your electronic warfare systems reacted in a matter of seconds, not in a matter of days or weeks or months. I guess this is one of the reasons why India was so successful last year.
Thanks so much, Tom. Yes, fascinating there. You just told us that Sindoor, how it was actually the future of warfare, and we are actually seeing it around us, literally in real time in Iran. The session could have gone on all evening. It's so great talking to you and hearing your thoughts on this. Someone as distinguished as you, analyst of such reputation, especially when it comes to air warfare. But I want to take the chance now. We're completely out of time. We have about 5 minutes. I'm being told by Nishita that we have time just for 2 questions. So I would request you to ask 2 questions. Please keep them short if you have them for Tom or for one of my panelists here. Yes, Venkatesh.
You just have to press the button.
Very quick question. I mean, you can answer it briefly here and then take it offline. Question is for you, sir. See, my question is from a historiography and research scholarship perspective on this genre of writing, because we are writing on an event which has just happened. There are political ramifications, there are sensitivities, international sensitivities, and so on and so forth. And availability of data would also be basis what the authorities would like to make public or what they would like to keep censored. And like you rightly said, there is obviously cognitive warfare going on. I mean, had we actually had those losses, would we have got the information from the authorities to add it in the book or talk about it in public, or suppose 1962 kind of suppose some situation happens again somewhere here and there. It's a harsh realities of life. Today, because the government has changed, we are able to look at 1962 in a very different way. But if you're writing about a live event which is just unfolded or probably part 2 is yet to unfold, what are the challenges in historiography? What are the constraints? And are there any sensitivities that we need to be careful about? What are the risks thereof? And how do you work around them for sake of academic integrity?
That's a good question, sir. This is a problem in India. If you see the Americans and especially the Europeans, they have very good declassification rules and laws. Right now, in Iranian conflict since February 28, around 18 to 19 USAF aircrafts, one of them was shot down by Iran, but the others have been destroyed by either fratricide. 3 F-15s were shot down over Kuwait by the Kuwaiti air defense missile system. So that is all come out in the open. What I feel is that personally, this is a personal opinion, we should have a good declassification laws. If we don't write our own history, someone else from outside will come and write our own history. For example, Henderson Brooks report, 1962, it's still not been declassified. What happened in 1971, we know what has happened, like in 1988, Operation Brass Tracks. Then even in 1999, what happened? It's still not open, I think. So we need to have a separate laws internally. The government should pass some laws in the parliament where we can access the research. Now this research which we do is to open source in other books and letters written by soldiers and airmen from outside of India. So researchers in India don't have access to what is happening. Like this goes back to post-independence era from 47 onwards. Certain things have been written, but certain things are still kept classified. Like in the US, there is a law which says that certain things should be declassified after maybe 10, 15 years, 20 years. I think Tom would be able to put some light on that.
Okay, we're out of time. I think just quickly to add to your question, Venkatesh, a couple of years back, one of my friends in South Block, one of the defense journalists, had put in an RTI application asking for the Defense Ministry's declassification policy. The response he got was that the declassification policy was classified. So, there you have it. I think we're completely out of time here. We've just time for exactly one question. Please keep it very short and just.
2:30, we're actually out of time.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Show the book.
Right. Okay.
Show the book on the camera.
Yeah. So this is the book. It's called The 88 Hours War. It's a very unique book. So it's a collector's edition. Tom is one of the co-authors. Sanjay Gandhi Maharaj, Mangesh, and Ravi Rikhi have authored this book. It's not available as of now in India. It will be soon. I think we'll figure something out. But we're completely out of time. Nishita is holding a gun to my head now. Thank you very much, Tom, for joining us. Thank you, Mangesh. Thank you, Vibhu.
I don't think we have seen a more packed, conference room. This was an incredible session. But I'm so sorry we have to end it up because we have a Dhurandhar session coming up. So I'm guessing all of you are here for that as well. The panel is here for that. However, what we can do for you is that the three gentlemen here, I'm sorry, Tom won't be able to be here. You can make sure that you get them outside and ask them all your questions. We'd like to call Nisha Dasgupta, please, to felicitate our panelists. And Tom, I'm sure once you're back in India, sometime for a visit, you'll get your felicitation bag as well. It's handcrafted for you. Thank you so much for joining us.